The ink on our separation agreement was barely dry when the man I supported for 25 years tossed my luggage onto the drenched asphalt. Preston looked down at me from the porch with a cold grin and declared that the $85 million belonged completely to him. I did not shed a single tear as the freezing rain soaked through my winter coat. At 55 years old, I never imagined watching the front door of my own home slam shut in my face. My neighbors probably assumed I was completely paralyzed by grief or terrifyingly weak for walking away without a massive shouting match. They could not perceive the profound clarity that washes over a person when a mask finally slips away forever. To understand how we arrived at that rain-slicked driveway, you have to look back to our 20s when we possessed nothing but optimism. Preston was an aspiring business builder who lacked any financial support or real direction. For 15 long years, I served as the absolute economic foundation of our household while he chased endless empty dreams. I spent those difficult decades working two exhausting positions, moving from an office assistant role by day to a bookkeeping shift at night. Every single dollar went toward paying our basic rent and rescuing his constantly collapsing operations. Preston would frequently hold my hands and promise that my deep personal sacrifices would eventually be rewarded tenfold. I willingly destroyed my own credit profile and maxed out multiple credit lines just to keep his professional fantasies afloat. However, as the years passed, a bitter transformation took hold of his character. The appreciative spouse slowly vanished, replaced by an arrogant narcissist who treated me like an invisible maid rather than an equal partner. The breaking point arrived on a standard Tuesday evening, while I was scrubbing the dinner plates in our quiet kitchen. Preston sat nearby at the table, casually scanning his weekly lottery numbers on his phone. The entire room suddenly fell into an unnatural stillness, and I turned around to see his face turn completely white. He had successfully matched every single digit on the card, securing a massive prize of $85 million. For one beautiful moment, I mistakenly believed our long decades of financial agony were finally over. But when he looked up at me, his eyes contained nothing but a chilling, detached calculation. Without uttering a single word of celebration, he slipped the winning paper into his jacket and locked himself inside his private office. Less than 48 hours later, he retained the most cutthroat legal specialists in the city. He blindsided me with divorce documents, demanding that I surrender all property and immediately exit his life. The very next morning, I gathered with my long-time legal representative, Carlton, in his modest downtown office. Carlton reviewed the aggressive demands and practically begged me to launch a major counter-lawsuit against my spouse. He insisted that I deserved exactly half of that massive jackpot after everything I endured. I stared out the office window and realized that a lengthy courtroom battle would completely destroy my remaining mental health. I refused to waste years of my existence, drowning in bitter hostility against a greedy man. I calmly instructed Carlton that we would not fight him openly, opting instead to play a completely different game. The legal representatives of my spouse intensified their pressure, threatening to burden me with massive historical debts if I resisted. I feigned absolute brokenness and agreed to relinquish the real estate, his corporate ventures, and the lottery prize. In exchange, I only demanded a single condition, which was total immunity from all joint legal liabilities. His arrogant lawyers gladly accepted the deal, completely missing a critical financial detail from our past operations. Years earlier, Preston frequently concealed his personal indulgences by routing transactions through an old consulting entity called Meridiacor LLC. Because he wanted to secure specialized local grants for female business owners, he registered the entity entirely under my name. I was the absolute sole proprietor and legal executive of that specific corporate shield. Preston was merely an authorized individual who utilized the corporate debit card for convenience. Crucially, he used that very corporate card to purchase the winning ticket, totally forgetting that assets bought by a corporation belong entirely to that business entity. When his team forced me to sign the waiver, they aggressively stated that Preston severed all ties to my worthless business assets. They believed they were protecting him, but they actually stripped him of any connection to the purchasing entity. Weeks later, we gathered inside the courthouse for the final legal confirmation. Preston sat across the polished wood table, wearing a triumphant and condescending smile that showed his complete confidence. Beside me, a brilliant specialist named Vance sat quietly with a leather briefcase, projecting absolute composure. When the magistrate asked if we were prepared to sign, Vance stood up and raised a formal objection. Vance calmly presented the authenticated bank tracing documents and the official state corporate registration records to the bench. I watched the physical color drain entirely from the face of the opposing attorney as the reality settled in. He began whispering frantically to Preston, whose expression instantly melted into absolute terror. By attempting to cut me out completely, Preston had legally signed away his own rights to the fortune. 3 months after that fateful day, I officially collected the total funds and purchased a beautiful coastal cottage in Carmel. The property cost slightly over $1 million, leaving me with immense security. I recently learned that Preston was forced to sell the family residence just to satisfy his crushing financial debts. He currently resides in a microscopic studio apartment and works an exhausting retail position that he completely despises. The money that he tried to steal slipped directly through his greedy fingers. As the evening ocean mist rolls across my new garden, I feel a deep sense of internal serenity. Justice was ultimately served, not through loud arguments, but through the natural consequences of a selfish person walking into his own trap. I now allocate a large portion of my funds to help other women escape financial exploitation. I am incredibly curious to hear your perspectives on this journey today. Would you have chosen to fight him openly in court, or would you have allowed the hidden trap to snap shut like I did? Please share your thoughts and your city in the comments below, and subscribe for more incredible stories.